building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
This recall's an extension of the big lie.
Him doing everything that he's not asking us to do, dining at fine establishments.
Beautiful, pretty boy governor decided to come here to the French Laundry.
The recall process has been weaponized. It's been weaponized. And they can't wait a few months, quite literally a few months.
Gavin Newsom shut down this state in a more severe way than did the other 49 governors.
Voting no will be protecting California from Trump Republicans trying to block us from beating this pandemic.
It's time for better, stronger leadership.
All of the things that we hold dear in this state, I think, are riding on this election.
They think if they can win in California, they can do this anywhere. Well, we will show them you're not going to get this done. Not here, never.
And so all of that rhetoric comes down to this moment tonight, election night. Good evening, I'm Dan Ashley.
And I'm Amma Dates. You're watching our special California Recall election show live on our app, Hulu Live, and anywhere you stream.
Polls are closing right now at 8 o'clock. We will bring you the first round of results just as soon as we get them in.
We will, and we have team coverage for you tonight. We're joined by ABC7 News anchor Kristen Z here in studio, along with ABC7 insider Phil Matier.
And we also have a full team of reporters in the field for you. ABC7 News reporter Laura Anthony live in Orange County with leading GOP candidate Larry Elder, and ABC7 News reporter Liz Kreutz live in Sacramento with Governor Newsom.
And let's begin with Liz, who has been covering the recall for months. Liz.
Good evening, Amma and Dan. Yes, we're here at the California Democratic Party headquarters in Sacramento. At some point tonight, now that the polls have closed, Governor Newsom is expected to come out and deliver remarks. We don't exactly know what time that will be. We do know that he's been with his family watching the returns. So far in this campaign, we have seen success for the Democrats with their strategy in framing this as a right-wing power grab, specifically targeting GOP frontrunner Larry Elder, making him the face of this Republican recall. Take a listen to what Governor Newsom had to say earlier today at a campaign event in San Francisco and what President Biden said last night at a campaign rally in Long Beach.
If we don't reject this recall, Larry Elder's the next governor of the state of California. I'm going to sound like Obama. Don't boo, vote. And vote no on this election.
He's the clone of Donald Trump. Can you imagine him being governor of this state?
It's election day.
And you can see this video here that was just posted by the Newsom campaign just 3 hours before the polls closed of Vice President Kamala Harris, again, urging people to vote. Governor Newsom's team is very confident that they are going to defeat this, but you can see that they have been working through today, Governor Newsom with that campaign event this afternoon, this video, trying to mobilize every single Democratic voter to come out and vote. And there's certain things that have really helped the governor. In addition to having this Democratic firepower, we've had Vice President Kamala Harris here, we've had Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar here, in addition to President Biden. But there's a few things that strategists will say have really helped Governor Newsom right now, and that is, number one, being able to brand Larry Elder as the face of this Republican recall, and number two, lessons learned from the 2003 recall of Gray Davis. They were able to get every single Democrat, prominent Democrat, to stay off the second part of the ballot. In 2003, they had Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante jump in the race, and Democrats believe that really hurt Gray Davis, that it took votes away from him. This time, there was a concerted effort to make sure that didn't happen. They were successful, and the Democrats have really shown a united front. They've even said that Democrats on all sides of the political spectrum, whether it's President Biden or District Attorney Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, are all standing behind the governor. So all of these factors combined have led to a very successful campaign for the governor. They are very confident, so much so, as we've been saying, that an aide last night said they don't see any scenario where they lose tonight. Again, we are awaiting Governor Newsom at some point tonight here in Sacramento. He is expected to deliver remarks, so we'll bring that to you live as we get that. Back to you, Dan and Alma.
Liz, the governor very confident tonight and his team optimistic tonight. But just a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, Less so because the polling looked like this was going to be even closer than it may be tonight as we wait for these numbers to come in. What does the governor and his team credit with a turnaround here in the polls?
That's a good question, and I think there was a poll that came out in mid-July that showed the race very, very tight. And it turns out, to be honest, the next time that poll came up a few weeks later, they issued a mea culpa, and they said we actually may have asked a question in a way that led to more yes votes. So it may have been a mistaken poll that actually ultimately led to mobilizing Democrats, because the polls in mid-July showed this race very tight, and that was actually a driving factor for Democrats to wake up and say, oh my goodness, we got to go vote. And so whether it's a faulty poll or simply the fact that Larry Elder jumped into this race and became sort of the scary face of this Republican recall to Democrats, all of that combined, not to mention the fact that the Republican challengers all want to repeal mask and vaccine mandates, which is something that most Californians support. All of that combined has helped turn things around for Newsom, Dan.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Liz, very much. We'll talk with you many more times this evening.
And as we mentioned, we have our reporters out everywhere. ABC7 News reporter Laura Anthony, Dan, she is with the Elder campaign in Orange County.
Yeah, and Laura, this is a more traditional election night event there, right?
Yeah, it is, Dan. Actually, it just got started, though, within about the last 10 minutes. We were starting to wonder if Larry Elder's supporters were going to show up in numbers. They have started to show up. The music is playing. The band is playing. It is just a few minutes into this party, and we went around and talked to some of the supporters. They do not believe what they're seeing in the polls. They are very confident still that Larry Elder will win this election, win the day, win the night here. So far, no sign of Elder himself. In fact, he did not make any public appearances today. He only chose to make a brief statement, a video statement on his Facebook page, telling his supporters that he will not only change California, he said he will change the world. Of course, Elder's best known as a radio talk show host. He didn't even enter this race until 2 months ago and almost immediately skyrocketed to a lead, big lead among those vying to replace Newsom. For those in the middle of the political spectrum, Elder's aggressive style and sometimes controversial positions on issues like Newsom's handling of the pandemic may have been a turnoff to some people, but here among his most ardent supporters, he's a hit.
So there's no front where I can think of where this man has done a good job. Not on schools, not on homelessness, not on the way he shut down this state to the point where we've only recovered half of our jobs pre-pandemic as opposed to 2/3 national average. Not on fire management, not on water management, not on energy management. I can't think of a single front where this man has done a good job.
And we're back live here. You can see someone is taking the stage here. They're talking about the turnout, what they believe is a strong late turnout. They were talking about here in Southern California, wait times at the polls of 1 hour and 15 minutes today. This is exactly what they're counting on, Dan and Alma, the Elder folks, are that this late turnout, strong turnout by those who support him will defy those polls and lead him to victory. Elder has not talked at all about losing this race. He made a brief appearance on the local radio station today, and he said he would not concede. He said he won't need to concede. He said Gavin Newsom is the one who will need to concede when this night is through. Live in Costa Mesa, Laura Anthony, ABC7 News.
Laura, thank you. And we have heard Republicans say they are good at showing up, right up until the end and getting those votes in. So we will check back with you, Laura, in a little bit. As a reminder, tonight on the recall ballot, voters were asked 2 questions, 2 very important questions. The first, do you want to recall Governor Newsom? Yes or no? Second, who do you want to replace him with if he is recalled? Voters could answer the second question even if they voted no on the first. Now, for Newsom to stay in office, more than 50% of people have to vote no on that first question. If not, whoever gets the majority of votes on the second question, no matter the percentage, wins. That's how it works out.
Yeah, that's part of the that's part of the controversy about the recall process in California. On the subject of those two questions, we're getting some numbers now just in, so let's show you what we can. Should Governor Newsom be recalled? This is 10% estimated total vote. So far, yes has 402,000 votes. No, he should not be recalled. 62% of the votes, about 650,000.
Yeah, so 38% to 62% voting no against the recall right now. So that is the first number we are getting in here tonight as we continue to follow this. And polls closed at 8 o'clock, so just about 9 minutes ago. And people have been voting by mail. Take a look now. If recalled, who replaces Governor Newsom? So this was question 2 on the ballot, the one that Newsom said, hey, leave blank. Just answer the first one, and that's it. Turn in your ballot. Well, it looks like right now, Larry Elder leading the field with 39% of the vote, 6,596. This is just 1% estimate of the total vote. Kevin Paffrath, the Democrat who was leading in the polls for Democrats, 10% right now with 1,693.
And Larry Elder has emerged just in recent weeks, really, as the front runner. ABC7 News anchor Kristen Z is with us here, as well as ABC7 insider Phil Mateer. Kristen, what are you seeing there in terms of breaking down some of these numbers?
Well, Dan, we are able to break down these numbers for you with our exclusive ABC7 recall election mapping system. Take a look at what you were just talking about, the latest totals. In fact, that is right. No on recall has 66% right now, way ahead of the 34% you see for yes. Remember, if you're Governor Newsom, you want the no vote to be bigger than 50% plus 1. But where are those votes coming from right now? Where are the counties that are actually doing the reporting? You can see it is coming from Sacramento, right? Where Governor Newsom has a commanding lead. Actually, that is showing us that's Napa County. Thank goodness we have the mapping feature. And also over here, you can see the totals there out of Ventura County. So those appear to be the counties that are reporting their totals thus far in the evening, which is still early because the polls just closed 11 minutes ago. So if you take a look, because this is closer to us and it's in the Bay Area, Napa County. In fact, let's just go ahead and zoom in there. This is the Bay Area. You can see most of the Bay Area has not reported any totals, but Napa County here, let's just take a look, okay? Right now, no is leading 72%, but what was it in the 2018 election when Governor Newsom went up against Republican John Cox, who was one of the replacement candidates? You can see Governor Newsom had 65% to Cox's 35%. So right now, Napa County, he is running stronger and better than he was back in 2018. So that's going to be one of the key things that we'll be watching all night for you. All right, right now, let's go ahead and take you to the state level. And we took a look at the recall. That's what we're watching. Also, candidates, right? You were just reporting to us that Larry Elder is in the lead right now in terms of the replacement candidates. You can see he's got 39% statewide. Kevin Paffrath, the YouTube star, the Democrat, running 10%. Kevin Faulconer, the San Diego former mayor, if you will, considered a moderate, had been fading down to the single digits, but right now he's in third place with 8%. And John Cox, who ran against Governor Newsom back in 2018, has 7%. So those are your leaders. Let's just take a look and see where the other notables are right now, because I want to find for you Kevin Kiley. There he is at 4%, the assemblyman, Republican, who had made a bit of a push. Caitlyn Jenner, take a look at this. Only 1% despite her celebrity status, despite the former Olympian status. So any comparisons to Arnold Schwarzenegger back in 2003, not playing right now at the moment. And if you want to take a look, we'll just take a look at Caitlyn Jenner's numbers in Napa County, 1% there. And who does Napa like out of this group? All right, not enough to show us that yet, but all night long we'll be using this map to get you the latest figures and take a close look at the Bay Area and beyond. Phil, what interested you about what we just saw here?
Well, the main thing is Napa is a pretty interesting setup there. I was over there over the weekend, and I was driving north, and the further north I drove, the more recall Newsom signs I saw, especially in the ag areas where water is an issue. But clearly the numbers coming out of the Bay Area are going to favor Gavin Newsom. He's very popular in the Bay Area. He's very popular from Sacramento down to the Bay Area, down to Monterey. That's this very strong Democratic corridor, which is likely going to be a big decider in this election. The next thing we're going to see is actually what the turnout numbers are and the rates are in Los Angeles and the southern part of the state, because that is where, although they have lots of Democrats on the rolls, the question is, are they going to turn out to vote? Republicans, however, are stronger in the Midlands of the state, the north, and in the Deep South, and we've yet to see those returns come in as well.
All right, pardon me. I'm just going to come back to this board because San Diego's numbers have just come in. And Phil, let's take a look at what San Diego's doing right now. No, 61% saying no to the recall election. That's got to make Governor Newsom very happy to see that.
It's got to make Kevin Falconer, the former mayor of San Diego, not too happy because they're saying both no to the recall, and it's going to be interesting to see what they say about his candidacy as well. So if that is a pattern that is going to be seen across the state, then it's going to make a big night for Gavin Newsom, if you want to call beating back a recall a big thing.
I think Kristen also pointed out in Ventura County, similar numbers down in Southern California, 2 to 1 voting no on the recall effort. As you suggest, that does not augur well for the challenge to Governor Newsom. And there have been a lot of comparisons to the 2003 recall election, obviously, Amma and everyone. And Phil, let me ask you this question. There are some important distinctions, one of which is Governor Newsom's approval rating is nearly twice that of Gray Davis's approval rating at the time he was recalled.
Another point was that if you look at the polls, people's feelings about the economy in California, it was completely down the drain when Gray Davis was facing a recall. Not only was the economy in bad shape, but we had rolling brownouts, and then they decided to hit everybody with the vehicle license fee, which increased everybody's car registration by $100, and that was sort of his French laundry that sent the ball rolling down the hill that just snowballed him. Gavin Newsom has a higher favorability rate. He's also on the right side as far as voters are concerned on his handling of the COVID, at least this phase of it. Remember, it was the COVID or his big shutdown of it, which generated a lot of anger and antipathy towards the governor in the last year in the COVID. But in this resurge, everyone is saying, look, we need to get vaccinated, we need to get masked. And he has made that the issue and pushing that. So, Dan, I think that's reflective as well, is that that's something different. Gray Davis was not on the right side of a lot of things in California at that time. And Gavin Newsom, by, in some ways, luck, because he could have gone the other way, is sitting there going, we're not Texas, we're not Florida. He actually has something to run on.
Yeah, and some of the exit polling says that just 3 in 10 California voters say that Governor Newsom's pandemic control measures are too strict.
So 7 in 10 say that that's good.
It's what is necessary. And 6 in 10 in this preliminary exit polling rate the Republican Party unfavorably, a challenge for those seeking, obviously, to unseat the governor. So the exit polling number is very interesting.
It is. And on that Republican side is that it's still in the shadow of Donald Trump. I mean, these numbers reflect also what the vote was a bit in the presidential. And that's another thing that Gavin Newsom's camp worked very effectively. They did not just make this about They did not make it about Gavin Newsom's performance. They made it about a Republican challenge to him, or at least they hyped that up. And then when Larry Elder, one of the more conservative of the Republicans, took the lead, they were able to say, okay, a Trump thing. So they put it in the Trump too, and that is in play with polling that they had taken that showed that Republicans are still seen as sort of far to the right for the state.
The advertising is almost Governor Newsom against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You know, in many respects.
Let's go. In many respects, we had President Joe Biden last night in Long Beach basically say that.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so that is what they are making it, and that's one of the things that the country is watching is, can you still run against Donald Trump even if he's out of the White House? And the answer in California is yes. That's still something that's strong, and we'll get a reaction from people.
All right, hey guys, we got some new figures just in the Bay Area, so let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. I'm going to zoom into the Bay Area numbers for you. We have San Mateo County now reporting 68% of their estimated total vote is in. You can see the no on recall is killing it at 81% there, with yes only at 19%. So that is very good news for Governor Newsom. Now let's also take a look at Santa Clara County, which just reported this batch of numbers, 69% of the total in. So that's a lot. And Phil, you were talking about how with the mail-ins, they really process a lot of those early, right? And once the polls close, they're ready to go. So there we go. 78% right now saying no to the recall. And these are the kind of numbers that Governor Newsom is going to need, really racking them up in strong Democratic areas like the Bay Area in order to get those totals.
Yeah, he doesn't only need the percentages, but the thing about the Bay Area, as we said, is that we vote more than the rest of the state. We have the numbers. You know, in other words, percentages can come and go in Del Norte or Placer County or down in Riverside County, but we have the population and we have the turnout, and it goes to the Democrats as well. But we have to keep an eye on, like I said, the Los Angeleses of the world. We just saw San Diego. So this is, it's turning into a, we're going to get some answers here pretty quick, I think, because it's a vote by mail election. So today's vote isn't really going to, I think, change it that much, not with numbers like this.
Yeah. And of course, everyone was waiting to get people to return their ballots. Let's get to ABC7 News reporter Amanda Del Castillo, who is live at the County Registrar of Voters office in the South Bay. Amanda, a lot of people were wondering, what should I do with question number 2 if I don't want this recall to go forward? Did you hear from anyone today if they had confusion and perhaps that's why it took them so long to vote? They didn't send it, they didn't mail it in. They came to the polling place on the day of.
It's really interesting. Everyone who I asked that question to were very, very clear and very certain about what they were doing and how they were voting today. The official word about that confusion came from the registrar's office itself. They said that people showed up earlier and they had to take some time and had to ask those questions because they weren't entirely sure. But this morning, or this evening, I should say, it's still busy in the South Bay, still not with voters. Instead, workers and volunteers here at the Santa Clara County Registrar's office will begin to bring in ballots collected from the 100 official ballot drop box locations throughout the county. There are roughly 1 million registered voters in Santa Clara County. Each received a recall ballot in the mail. The county's registrar's office says, of course, nothing compares to a presidential election year, but they'd still say the day brought a busy turnout. At times, we counted a couple dozen people, the line only growing around 5 p.m. when most people were off work. Officials tell us the special election led to some confusion, as I'd mentioned. Voters surprised to see just 2 questions.
Well, there's only 2 questions on the ballot, so people were confused at first, but I think people are getting the hang, they're getting familiar with what to do. There's 2 questions, yes or no, and then a replacement.
Of course, everybody has up and downs, but I don't believe that that's enough to remove him from his office.
The reason why I came out to vote is because, like, I remember last time with Gray Davis, who did we vote? Arnold Schwarzenegger, an entertainer. This is just a waste of time and money.
And among the others we connected with, most said they were throwing their support behind Governor Newsom tonight, critical of the recall election effort and adamant about keeping him in office. But the work continues here. I'm going to step out of the way so you can see those workers and the volunteers that we were talking about, all waiting for those ballots to arrive at this hour. I know it's 21 minutes after polls closed. We did speak with a few people who were on their way inside. This was before 8 o'clock, saying that they were here to vote Governor Newsom out of the office. So it's very different who we're hearing from. A lot of people, again, very clear, very certain about what they're here to do today. So we're keeping our eyes on development. Again, just about 21 minutes after the polls officially closed. I'm reporting live here in San Jose. Amanda Del Castillo, ABC7 News.
Okay. Amanda, thanks very much. And we want to go to Jonathan Madison, lead attorney at the Madison firm and Bay Area Regional Vice Chair with the California Republican Party. Jonathan, are you with us? There he is. All right, well, we hope you can hear us. I'm going to ask you a question and see if we can get the audio turned up. I know you're going to tell me you're very confident in how this is all going to turn out tonight, and you still believe that Governor Newsom will be recalled, but the results that we're getting thus far in the Bay Area and around the state indicate that that may not happen. What say you?
Well, I don't know how confident I am that the governor is actually going to be recalled. I think that there were 2 goals if you're a Republican or if you're a Libertarian or a no-party preference voter. I think the number 1 goal is that your voice is heard, right? And is that government is held accountable at the end of the day. When you have a significant rise in crime, significant rise in homeless population, when you have problems managing our forest fires, when you have problems managing a COVID-19 outbreak, I think that the voters have a voice here in the recall election. I think that there is a reason that this is the 5th governor in U.S. history to face a recall election. It's one of only 2 recall elections that have actually made it to a ballot in California since 1913. So if you're a Republican, your first goal was to get this election on the ballot, and second goal, great if you actually pull it off and the governor's recalled, but better that we make the first goal happen of holding government accountable, having your voice heard.
Now, Jonathan, let me play devil's advocate with you here. I think it's actually the fourth time that a governor's been recalled. But this is not why the recall election was started. The recall election was to get him kicked out of office. Are you shifting the goals now that the polling doesn't look like it's going your way and the results don't look like at this early stage it's going your way? I mean, to spend $300 million just to let people be heard, that wasn't really the point of the recall, was it?
No, I think that you had different factions and different reasons for the recall. Number one reason was to have the governor recalled and removed from office. But I also think the broader implications are holding government accountable, right? I mean, even if you're voting for a candidate that happens to not be successful, your vote counts, which is my point. So, and as you know, I mean, there's only a certain number of votes that have been tallied at this point in California. I think it's too early to just call the election altogether. But you know, I do think, and I do agree, number one goal is to get him removed from office. I think 1.5 million votes, actually 1.5 million people plus signing a petition to recall him speaks volumes for the number of support, the volume of support of this recall election, which doesn't just come from Republicans.
All right, fair enough.
Let's talk a little bit about the people who are turning out to vote. Do you feel that one candidate did a better job, regardless of who comes out on top in this, in reaching the minority people of California, reaching the people, the Latin community, which is such a big contributor to this, the African-American community? Do you think one candidate really did a better job of reaching those communities?
You know, collectively, I think Kevin Faulconer and Larry Elder managed to reach those communities better than other candidates. Of course, I wouldn't dismiss Kevin Kiley and a lot of the other candidates. A lot of candidates did very well, but those are the three candidates that stand out to me. Kevin Faulconer has a very high appeal among voters of all different walks of different creeds, nationalities, all over the economic spectrum. And of course, his record speaks for that. You know, he won in a deep blue city in San Diego and a deep blue state. Larry Elder has a mass appeal with voters all over the state in the Larry Elder talk show. Kevin Kiley, I work with Kevin Kiley as a young Republican. And, you know, I think that, you know, collectively, those three candidates have done a great job of reaching out to minority communities.
Jonathan Filmatier here. I actually have two questions. The first one was, how involved was the Republican Party in California in launching the recall? Was it involved?
The California, would you say that last part again? I'm sorry, I don't think I heard the tail end.
Was the California Republican Party in at the beginning of this recall? Because I was under the impression when I first started covering it that it was pretty much a grassroots libertarian type effort with no party affiliation. Did you guys just come in and make it a Republican issue?
So initially it was a grassroots movement, and it was funneled through the California Republican Party. We immediately voted to endorse it once we caught wind of it. But I think that's the beauty of this.
Right.
So I think the beauty of it, sorry, just briefly, because I think this needs context. The beauty of this is that it's been a grassroots movement from the beginning, and the state party acted immediately to endorse the movement. So I just want to make that clear.
And the second thing is, we're looking at these returns, and it appears that in the last recall, Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected governor, and many people thought that was an upset. And he was elected in part because he was seen as a moderate Republican who was liberal on a number of social issues and was very palatable to a number of voters, including Democrats. In this, we have a reaffirmation, it appears, of the classic Democratic-Republican split in the state. And my question is, the Republican Party going forward, isn't this just a replay of the presidential election? I mean, if you're still the party of Donald Trump, how do you ever win?
Well, you know, I think a lot of people have tried to brand the Republican Party the party of Donald Trump. And I got to tell you, there's a Republican Party notwithstanding the former president, Donald Trump. You know, he was a president, and a lot of people have different perspectives, and a lot of people have various support for him. But I wouldn't call the Republican Party the Trump Party or the party of Trump. No more than you would call the Democratic Party the Democratic Party of Newsom or the Democratic Party of Biden. So I think it's a mistake to just deem the whole party the party of Trump. And I think that's actually a strategy that the governor has used to paint Republicans, all Republicans, as Trump supporters. So I just be careful about that. And I'm respectful of people who do support the president and Republicans who don't support the president, because everybody is entitled to their own opinion and has differences of opinion.
All right, I think you would refer to the Democratic Party now probably as the party of Biden as a sitting president. The question is whether or not a former president, i.e. Trump, would have that same status. Jonathan Madison, lead attorney at the Madison firm and Bay Area Regional Vice Chair with the California Republican Party. We really greatly appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right, let's get back over to Kristen with the latest numbers. Kristen.
Yeah, I mean, first, before I get to new state totals and Bay Area totals, which just came in, I want to address Madison's point about who is really the Republican standard bearer here. Because if you can look at this, Larry Elder has 41% of the vote of the people who chose a replacement candidate, okay? Kevin Faulconer, who more people consider as the moderate, right, someone who has not aligned himself with Trump, only has 10%. It is pretty clear to look at this who is going to emerge as the leading potential Republican gubernatorial, nominee for next year. So we'll just see about that. All right, now let's get to the latest figures just coming in. Bay Area, a lot of counties are now reporting, so let's take a look here. San Francisco, you are in, not a surprise. No has 88%. That is resounding. That is what we expect with San Francisco's politics. Let's move across the Bay to Contra Costa County. A little more conservative, but still overwhelming. You can see 76% voting no on the recall. Alameda County, what you consider a more liberal county, 85%. That pretty much mirrors the 2015 election, by the way. Santa Clara County, we covered. This is what's interesting in the Bay Area. All right, look at Solano County. It is the only Bay Area county right now to be voting yes on the recall, with 64%, about 2/3 of the votes in. And you can see it's not even close. It's 70-30. And what is interesting about that is Solano County, if you recall, the Bay Area's pandemic policy and restrictions, it's kind of been the lone one in terms of being last to issue new restrictions, not going along with some of the vaccine or mask mandates. So interestingly, that is a point where Governor Newsom is scoring points right now, but apparently not in Solano County.
And Kristen, Solano County was also, of all the Bay Area counties, lagged in last place with the return rate of their ballots at about 36% the last time we checked. Marin County had the most in. So it is very interesting what you're pointing out.
Yeah, and if they're more conservative county, it stands to reason that they'll have more in-person voting. That's usually linked. Not sure if that's what's driving it this time, but real quick, just look at Marin County, 85% no on recall. Sonoma County, 78%. Napa County, you're at 72%. So let's now go out of the Bay Area and take you to Southern California, because they've got some new totals in. Los Angeles, huge population center, the biggest, and they've been waiting on this one. Governor Newsom needed to drive up that turnout in the Democrats in the county, and he's got it. 76% voting no on the recall.
60% of the estimated total vote there, so significant numbers, Kristen.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And they were ready to go. Let's take a look at this. Riverside County, more conservative, so you can see it's running pretty close. In Orange County, this is kind of a big one too, right? Because Orange County is what you consider the most conservative area of Southern California. And in the past, it's really gone from, red to purple, and the congressional races reflect that as well. And so right now, Governor Newsom is even leading there, no on recall. Let's just compare that to the 2018 election. We were looking at Orange County, where you can see, Dan, you see this, Alma, you see this, it's 50-50. Right? So right now, Governor Newsom is outperforming what he did in 2018 in Orange County right now with this recall, 58% saying no. Phil, I know you think that's an interesting point. You told us to watch Orange County.
That's right, because that is sort of one of the bellwethers. It's a populous county. It has a high both Republican and Democratic history. So that would be one that would be split, but you'd need it. You'd need it to win, and right now it appears that Gavin Newsom is leading there. It's today's vote, drop-off vote and voting ballot is not comparable to the mail-in ballots, and that's one key difference we're seeing tonight is these votes have been processed. They just have to be counted. There's not a lot of controversy about it. It's going to be a quick night as we go along like this.
Phil, these numbers are interesting on a number of levels. I want to quickly comment or get your thoughts on what's happening to John Cox, who obviously ran last time. Larry Elder suddenly snuck in and became the front runner the last few weeks. He's getting clobbered here tonight in terms of the numbers we're seeing so far. What does that say? John Cox spent a fortune on television advertising. What does that say about his future in the Republican Party and a potential run next November, and the same thing for Larry Elder?
Well, you know, for John Cox, he's already run for governor, and he's run for other office as well. He's becoming one of those things that is sort of a death sentence in politics. It's called the perennial candidate.
Right.
And if you go.
But he should be doing better tonight than he did.
No, you know something. Theoretically, he should be doing better. Larry Elder became both the voice and the presence of the Republicans in California, especially the conservative Republicans. What this tells us is that there's not much room for moderation in California's politics when it comes to the conservative side. Like Kevin Faulconer, you can't be a moderate conservative and get attention in your own party. You can be a successful mayor, but that doesn't translate statewide. John Cox is out there with his bear. And what bears do in the woods, and it just didn't take off either. Larry Elder, it's interesting because a lot of his support came from conservative talk shows and his presence on the conservative network, which is still strong, both in the state and nationally. And he became the buzz person. But with that comes the alliance with Trump, whether it's implied or it's real or however you want to do it. That puts Trump on the ballot as well. And what we're seeing here for the Republicans, you know, whether they want to admit it at this point or not, as long as they are that party, they're going to hit a wall of 38 to 40%. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right, let's get to our network of reporters. Thank you, Phil. We'll check back with you in just a couple of minutes. Let's get to ABC7 News reporter J.R. Stone. J.R. is live in Alameda County for us tonight. J.R.
Well, yeah, I was just talking with the registrar of voters a little while ago. He was releasing those numbers. You heard Kristen talking about it. I mean, already more than 300,000 votes have been counted. That's more than 30% of the vote here in Alameda County. And keep in mind, 84% of that 30% is going no against the recall. I found that interesting because we talked with dozens of people outside the main voting location here in Oakland, and a lot of those people, a majority of those people, were against this recall. I want to stand out of the way right now as we go off here, and you can see a lot of these workers busy into the nighttime hours. Yes, the voting is closed, but they are collecting ballots from 100 locations here in Alameda County. So it is a busy night, and it will continue being a busy night this evening. I now want to go to some of the video that we shot earlier today where you can see some of those cars that are lined up, people in line to get their vote in. And a lot of people that we talked with were excited about it. The energy was high. People wanted their voice to be heard. And if there was one thing that I heard over and over from a number of people was their concerns about masks and mask mandates. They were for a lot of the mandates and not necessarily in favor of what some of the Republicans have been saying. But take a listen to what those said here in Oakland.
I think it kind of scared me about kids not wearing masks in school. That was really scary, especially with my, son in school. I definitely want to make sure that, they're protected since they can't get vaccinated.
I think that this recall of the governor is an attempted coup as far as I'm concerned. The way it's structured, that we could potentially have a governor that would have less than 20 or 25% of the voters, is just it's an anti-democracy thing.
And back out here live, you can see some of those locations. And we're talking about, like I said before, 100 locations here in Alameda County that were collecting different ballots. And you can see those ballots are coming in tonight. So while more than 30% of the vote has been counted, that leaves around 70% that still has to be counted. And keep in mind, when it comes to turnout here, they are expecting between 60 and 70%, which are very strong numbers. Not as high as the last presidential race here in Alameda County. That was above 80%. That was also a record here in Alameda County, but nevertheless, strong turnout numbers here in the county. Reporting live in Oakland, J.R. Stone, ABC7 News.
All right, thank you, J.R.
So interesting what's happening. Let's go now to ABC7 News reporter Kate Larson. She's live at San Francisco City Hall with what's happening there. Kate?
Well, Dan, in just about 5 minutes, we're going to go upstairs and hear from the Director of Elections for our first update tonight on San Francisco's reporting. Meanwhile, this is the Department of Elections. It was a buzz of activity just until about 20 or so minutes ago. At 8 o'clock on the dot, they started packing up this whole department. There were cheers from the crews. They started putting away the ballot laptops, you name it. The ballots started to go away in the boxes. And then take a look at this. This is inside the Department of Elections, and in each one of those trays, those are actually ballots that have already been opened and scanned. Take a look at this video. This is at 8 o'clock. This is how they begin tabulation in San Francisco. It's not the most dramatic video, but simply someone from IT presses a button, and that is how the tabulation begins here in San Francisco. Some of those ballots that had already arrived were already scanned. In fact, almost 50% of registered voters in San Francisco, about 247,000 people, those ballots were already in as of yesterday. Take a look at this. This is what the Department of Elections looked like earlier today. There was a steady stream of voters, a bit of a lunchtime rush, and then a lot more folks as the workday wrapped up. But there were no lines. It was calm. Things seemed to be going well. But I did speak to a number of voters about how they feel about this recall election.
This potential recall could really mess up California in a really big way. I know there's a lot of eyes on it. My friends have been talking about it. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. So right now I think that Democrats are in the lead, but I know that Republicans really turn up in voting days. So I'm really worried what's going to happen.
I don't necessarily think that Gavin Newsom is doing a great job for California, but I think that it's better than the alternative of the candidates that are in this recall election.
Today I'm voting to recall Gavin Newsom. You know, this is the nail in my coffin, because you know what? Here's the thing, Gavin Newsom, I love you. You're a great Hollywood star, but at the end of the day, people have suffered, and we need to get back to work. People got to get back to work.
And this is some of the video of the cleanup that happened here in City Hall right at 8 o'clock when polling closed. Those 3 interviews you just listened to, I thought really nicely explained why this recall happened. There was one person who clearly wanted Gavin Newsom recalled. There was another person who does not think Gavin Newsom has done the best job in California during the pandemic, but they don't like the other choices on the ballot. And then there was a third person who supported Gavin Newsom wholeheartedly. So that's what this debate has been all about. Keep in mind, all 3 of those people live in San Francisco, where 63% of registered voters are Democrats. So we'll have to see how this night turns out. As soon as I sign off with you all, we'll head upstairs to City Hall and speak to the Director of Elections, and we'll check in with you later.
Okay.
Live in San Francisco, in City Hall, I'm Kate Larson. Back to you.
All right, Kate, great. Thank you very much. See you shortly.
All right, from San Francisco down to San Diego, that is where John Cox is tonight. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, I'm a long-term guy. You know, I started my business 40 years ago with a long-term view, and I've run my businesses with integrity and taking a long-term view. I think that's what political leadership should do. It's too much short-term thinking. It's too much just of the moment, you know, and appealing to the emotions of the moment. We need to lead people. We need to be honest with people about COVID, about the steps we need to take, about the issues of the cost of living and the quality of life issues I've been talking about. So I hope other people besides me get involved and take responsibility. I'd like to see a lot of other business leaders decide to get into the fray and get involved. And so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you all very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
That was John Cox just a few minutes ago. Phil, that's not a concession speech, but it's certainly not a victory speech. That sounds like I'm a long-term guy. It's not about tonight. It's about the longer play. It doesn't sound like he's too confident anymore.
No, I would say that's about as close as to a concession speech as you are going to hear. And that's the way this is going for John Cox. Larry Elder's a different story as we go on and watch as the results go around here. You know, there's one thing that we've kind of left out because we're reporting the results as well, and that is, you know, the money involved in this. I mean, it's cost the state $270 to $300 million to hold this election. There's questions out there about people people are saying, should we change possibly the process of qualifying recalls, what we've been going through? Gavin Newsom raised and spent some $80 million in the last, 6 weeks? So there's a good reason why that we're seeing the turnout that we're seeing right now. And it's going to be interesting that after we see the results tonight, whether people are saying, should we stick with this as our way of doing business in California, or is that time to take a review at that as well?
Was that $300 million well spent? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we do have some breaking news right now. Just getting this in. Based on the exit poll and our analysis of the vote in so far, ABC News projects that California has voted not to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. ABC News projects that California has voted not to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. And I want to take you back to our exclusive election results map. You can see right now, no has basically a little more than 2/3 at 67%. That is what is enabling, along with ABC News, other exit polls and analyses, allowing them to project that. So Governor Newsom looking really good. I just want to show you one thing. This is really important, I think, to a lot of people who are watching closely. You know, you hear about Larry Elder getting 43% right now out of the replacement candidates, but this is what that actually means when you put it in context. Look at this. 7.9 million voted in the recall, but only 4 million voted for one of the replacement candidates. That's question number 2. Remember, Governor Newsom's whole push was leave the second question blank, and it appears just about half the people did. All right, so let's go back to that. Let's go back to looking at the candidates. Larry Elder, if he has 43%, right, of this, but let's see, multiply that by, what was the number, you guys? The number multiplied by 4 million, you are getting 1.7 million. So basically, Larry Elder got 1.7 million votes, if you want to look at it that way. And what did Governor Newsom get? If you count all the no votes as people who essentially voted for Newsom, he has 5.3 million votes.
Interesting.
Yeah, compared to Larry Elder's 1.7. So that gives you a little more perspective. Dan?
Very, very interesting. And math on the fly, Kristen, that's pretty good too. Thank you for that. You know, one of the things that I'd love to discuss here tonight is we heard from the vice chair of the Republican Party a few minutes ago saying that some Californians wanted their voices heard on this question. Well, that's not really why there was a recall effort. The recall effort was to remove Gavin Newsom. But how much of this, Phil, is really about, going back to what John Cox just said, long-term guy, the next election, and getting some, damaging Governor Newsom and getting people riled up and getting some name recognition for Larry Elder, John Cox, and whoever else might emerge? How much of that is this really about?
Well, you know, Dan, it's interesting because, you know, in politics and in life, we tend to assign like reasons and motivations and sort of a master plans. And sometimes we're laying that just down on top of a chaotic situation. When this recall started, it was started by a former sheriff's deputy, and it was a very shoestring operation. It wasn't much of anything until Gavin Newsom went to the French Laundry. And then you had people sort of glomming onto it as sort of an opportunity, in some ways to get into office, in other ways to make a bigger statement. And, you know, all these things are in there, and plus, you know, we're also talking about saying no to a recall. Some people just didn't like the way this was being done. You know, if you have, Gavin Newsom said it, if you want to knock me out, wait till the election and do it then. But this was something that sort of caught fire and people were scrambling around on, Dan. And it started out as a grassroots thing, and they didn't even think that they were necessarily going to get it, even on the ballot, and let alone capture this much attention. But it goes to show that in a lot of fronts, and Gray Davis faced this as well, you know, people are feeling edgy and unhappy right now. I mean, we have fires, we have electrical shortcomings, we have people questioning pandemic. There are a lot of things going on right now. Gavin Newsom is one of many governors facing challenges like this, not recalls, but a lot going on, a lot of discontent, and it just goes to show that it doesn't take much to spark, you know, a fire. And now Gavin Newsom's come in with everything, and the entire Democratic establishment and businesses around California were against the recall. Unions were against the recall. Just about everyone, that was one thing they agreed upon among, you know, the establishment, and we're seeing that.
All right, thanks, Phil.
All right, let's get to Christian Arana, who is the Vice President of Policy with the Latino Community Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us. Seeing the numbers that are coming in, we knew getting the Latino vote was very important during this recall election. So did Governor Newsom come through, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, I mean, Governor Newsom definitely stepped up his outreach to Latino communities. I think what's also worth pointing out was that there were still a lot of barriers facing our community in terms of our participation for this election. Many of us didn't know a recall election was happening. A lot of us didn't know what a recall election was, right? And so Governor Newsom and his team really stepped it up in the last couple of weeks to try to phone bank, canvass, do the door-to-door conversations with our community. And, you know, slowly but surely, and when we count every single vote, we'll see that Gavin Newsom won the majority of the Latino vote.
What do you think was the most important factor for the Latino community? Was it kids in school and how the pandemic is being handled? Was it homelessness? Was there one overriding issue that you felt was most important?
So it's a combination of those, but I think a very important issue for our community was healthcare. The Latino Community Foundation has polled our community for the last several years now, and every single election in which we polled our community, healthcare always rises to the top. And it was Governor Newsom that passed healthcare for our undocumented folks in our state, and that was a message that he was putting out there to our community, that he was the one that did that, whereas his opponents were the ones trying to take it away. So I think relaying that message out and continuing to let the community know that he's been there for them, and then now that he will continue to be there for them, will also be useful for him going into his re-election next year.
Christian, what does this say about the growing strength and power of the California Latino community and the ability to really influence elections and to get to compel candidates to be responsive to that community?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think what we learned in this election is that the Latino vote and Latino voters are critical for victory for any candidate and for any political party. So it wasn't just Gavin Newsom. I saw Larry Elder and the rest of these guys and other folks try to talk to the Latino community. And I think moving forward, you know, we really need to respect the Latino voting bloc for the powerful voting bloc that they are. They are young people who organize on TikTok. You know, there are older voters who just listen to Spanish language radio. You know, we care deeply about immigration. We also care deeply about healthcare and jobs, just like everyone else. And so moving forward, you know, campaigns, candidates, political parties especially, they need to see us as this complex and broad swath of a powerful voting bloc and really talk to us in the ways that we are able to understand and connect with.
Yeah, and you know, during the pandemic, the Latino community was disproportionately, you know, hit with COVID cases. So sad to see. And you talked about health care. Obviously, there were things that Governor Newsom did that did not sit well with people. Of course, we talk about the infamous French laundry.
Sure.
You think overall people agreed with his stance on how to handle the pandemic?
Well, I mean, the election results speak for themselves tonight, that they did. But what I would advise the governor and anyone really, whether it's running for governor of California or your local school board, if you do not continue to engage our community on a daily basis and talk to us about the issues that we care about, we are a swing voting bloc, and not in terms of Democrat versus Republican, but whether or not we will actually mobilize to turn out to vote, right? We need a reason to have hope to come out for elections like this. And so the governor got that tonight, but for him and for everyone else going into next year's midterms, they really need to start hammering that case beginning tomorrow, not super late next year.
Wake up call.
Yeah, Kristen, you know, you mentioned the complexity of the Latino community, and it is surely that, and it's diversity within a diverse group of people. What would you say to candidates in California who have to try to navigate a way? It's always dangerous for any candidate to lump one group of people as a single monolithic group. As you said, it's a complex and complicated group of people, the Latino community in California, with varied interests and varied viewpoints.
Well, I would say don't be cheap. That's really the message. Do not be cheap. It takes a lot of work to mobilize Latino voters, and the more attention and money and investment that you put into our community, you will benefit from that type of investment. So for example, the Latino Community Foundation earlier this summer launched the Latino Power Fund. We know that when we invest in grassroots organizing, people will pay attention and they will come out to vote. So that's something that we're doing in philanthropy. I work at a philanthropic organization. As we know in elections, there's tens of millions of dollars out there. And so going into next year's election, what I would advise, if you really want to understand Latino voters, you have to understand that it's a young voting bloc. Over half of the 8 million eligible Latino voters in the state of California are under 35. People like me.
Christian, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to interrupt you because the governor's about to speak. I'm going to let you take that. But Christian Arana, thank you very much.
Yes.
I want to focus on what we said yes to as a state. We said yes to science. We said yes to vaccines. We said yes to ending this pandemic. We said yes to people's right to vote without fear of fake fraud or voter suppression. We said yes to women's fundamental constitutional right to decide for herself what she does with her body, her fate and future. We said yes to diversity. We said yes to inclusion. We said yes to pluralism. We said yes to all those things that we hold dear as Californians, and I would argue as Americans: economic justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, our values where California's made so much progress. All of those things were on the ballot this evening. And so I'm humbled and grateful to the millions and millions of Californians that exercised their fundamental right to vote and express themselves so overwhelmingly by rejecting the division, by rejecting the cynicism, by rejecting so much of the negativity that's defined our politics in this country over the course of so many years. I just think of our kids watching all of this. Nightly news, day in and day out. And I just wonder, I've got 4 young kids. Oldest about to turn 12 this weekend. And what they're growing up to. In a world where we're so divided, these kids increasingly fearful, isolated, disconnected. And we're teaching them that. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think we owe our kids a deeper sense of respect, and all of us as adults, a responsibility to disregard this false separateness. We're so much more in common as a state and a nation than we give ourselves credit for. I've been all over the state of California over the last many years, but notably in the last 9 months. Conservative parts of the state, progressive parts of the state, folks that I know were going to vote no, and votes that I knew were going to vote yes on this recall, and turned out to do just that. But one thing that's universal, everybody wants to be respected. Everyone wants to feel some connection to one another. And we all certainly in this pandemic want to feel safe, protected. And those are universal values. And I think about just in the last few days, and the former president put out saying this election was rigged. Democracy is not a football. You don't throw it around. It's more like antique vase. You can drop it and smash it in a million different pieces. And that's what we're capable of doing if we don't stand up to meet the moment and push back. I said this many, many times on the campaign trail. We may have defeated Trump, but Trumpism is not dead in this country. The big lie, the January 6th insurrection, all the voting suppression efforts that are happening all across this country, what's happening, the assault on fundamental rights, constitutionally protected rights of women and girls. It's a remarkable moment in our nation's history. But I'm reminded of something, a few decades ago, someone told me when describing a difficult and challenging moment, said, the world is too small, our time is too short, and our wisdom is too limited to win fleeting victories at other people's expenses. And he went on to say, we must all triumph together. So in that spirit of recognizing and reconciling this moment, in trying to understand what's going on, not just here in this state, but all across the United States of America. I just want to say this. Tonight, I'm humbled, grateful, but resolved in the spirit of my political hero, Robert Kennedy, to make more gentle the life of this world. Thank you all very much, and thank you to 40 million Americans, 40 million Californians, and thank you for rejecting this recall. Good night, everybody.
Governor Newsom speaking tonight, saying voters voted yes to science, yes to vaccines. Dan, you saw that, just that cool, confident demeanor there.
Yeah, really, and he has the gift of gab, certainly, and this is a triumphant night for him. The line I particularly liked was, democracy is not a football to be tossed around, it's more like an antique vase. A clever line, and that speaks to so many people thinking that the recall process, Phil, had been hijacked in California, or as the governor had said on the campaign trail, weaponized.
Yeah.
But a big night, certainly, for the governor.
Yes, a very big night for the governor, and he made it very clear in that speech, I think, that it was forces of one versus forces of the other, forces of light versus forces of darkness. What we didn't see in that speech is anything about possibly his role in this, possibly that mistakes might have been made, or any type of reaching out to people who might be concerned about other things and saying there's room for you as well. This was pretty much an us as them type speech, and for the state and for the nation. So he is continuing with this line, this 60-40 line that we see in the state and other places, or even across the country, where it is one versus the other, versus, even as he talks about coming together, at least I didn't hear anything. I did not hear any olive branch being extended to those voters who, out of a sense of frustration, anger, or even weaponizing, decided went for this recall.
Yeah, that's true. He didn't really address them. There was no conciliatory remark to them, at least in this moment, as he spoke extemporaneously. All right, Kristen, you're breaking down numbers for us, I know, and again, it's been called for Governor Newsom, but Kristen, you have some numbers and someone to speak with.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the numbers show that it's a resounding defeat for the recall. And so we want to bring in Ann Dunsmore, who is with Rescue California, a committee that really was behind the recall, in support of the recall, joining us now. And you, I have no doubt, are very disappointed. But let's just take a look at what you think went wrong, because Rescue California and recall supporters painted this picture of California as being in dire straits, from the economy in shambles to crime getting worse, social issues, the pandemic and the restrictions. But it seems like voters have resoundingly rejected those arguments and may have a different vision of California. Is that how you take it?
Not one bit. I think everything you said, I have exactly the opposite opinion of. You know, for us, it's the first step in accomplishing what needs to happen, which is a bit of a revolution in California. And I think for this governor, who won by a landslide when he was elected, to have even had to face a legitimate recall. And the evening is not over. I'm happy that you're crunching the numbers, but you know and I know that the numbers you're looking at are numbers that came in off of the absentees only. Los Angeles and San Francisco mailed their ballots out a week early, ahead of all other counties. They were overwhelmingly Democrat as opposed to a closer mix. I don't know that it means we win, but here's why I think we won. I think we won because this governor finally had to start addressing some questions. And by the way, he didn't win by addressing any issues whatsoever. He is still a hypocrite. He is still misleading, deceptive, pay to play. I think a lot of seeds have been sown that will continue to grow the discontent in California.
Question, Phil Mateer here. If the governor is all those things you said, and this was all out there, how do you explain the fact that 60% of the voters said, no, we want to keep him, and also that we know that the numbers aren't going to change that dramatically. It's just not.
Well, I don't agree with you. I think they're going to change dramatically.
Well,
so we have a fundamental difference
would have
of opinion
to be for the recall going forward, because we have more than half the votes in right now. But
well, I don't know that that number's correct, but anyway, I don't think, with all due respect, I think there's another way. I think looking at the Secretary of State's numbers, it's a much different scenario. But go ahead. I mean, you know, we'll know in a few days.
59%.
They haven't even started counting they haven't even turned in the first round of votes of in-person voting today. And the mail-in ballots can continue to come in and be counted for at least another week. So, I mean, you can say all you want about it, but it's not over. It doesn't mean I think that we'll be able to pull out a win, but I don't think you get to sit there and say, by the way, it was 70% just about 2 minutes ago, and now you just said 60. So you're kind of proving out my point.
Regardless, at the current moment, the governor is outperforming what he did in 2018 in his race against John Cox. So my question to you is, how does this bode for the Republican Party next year, 2022, when you have a regular gubernatorial election? Because as you know, of the Republicans that were in this race, hoping to be the replacement, Larry Elder is carrying over 40%. Is that who you want as the party standard bearer? Or do you think, do you wish the party had endorsed someone like Kevin Faulconer?
Do you want to just ask the question so that I can't even answer the first part of it? Or do you, I mean, what's your question? Do you want to make a
My question is Larry Elder, who has emerged out of this as the most popular Republican, the standard bearer for the Republicans next year?
I don't know. But I do think that there's room for independence. I do think that there's room for another. I think that the Democrat Party needs to start looking at this man who is governor and head of their party in this state, and maybe come up with a plan B for him. I think shipping him off to an ambassadorship somewhere might save their bacon next year, because I disagree with you 100%. This man is damaged goods. He does not fit the bill of a governor that's now having the trouble that we are having at his hands. PG&E can't continue to run this state if he keeps aligning himself with Jason Kinney's clients like this and doing pay to play in full view. People will become more and more accustomed. This movement isn't going away. He is not going to stop making people unhappy if he keeps thinking that this is all about how great he is and not about the problems that he's put upon the people of California. So I am very clear on what your opinion is, and mine is exactly the opposite. No surprise.
I don't think you're clear on what our opinion is. We haven't actually expressed our own opinions.
Going forward,
well, you've expressed yours more than I've expressed mine, so I kind of got it. Go ahead.
Going forward, what do you see as the next step? We have this election. If numbers hold or shrink or whatever, and Gavin Newsom stays in office, what's the next step? Or what do you see going forward in the next 6 months, year, leading up to the next election? You said it's not going to go away. So what do you think?
No, Rescue California is not going away. I don't think we're dark, evil people. I think we, I've just spent 2 days traveling with Mark Kloss, who's a Joe Biden supporter and a lifelong Democrat and the father of Polly Kloss, and to hear him talk about crime and the recent killing by Troy Davis, an early violent felon that was released with no bail under the Newsom early release program. I think that story is just starting to germinate. I think the PG&E scandal is germinating. I don't think the Employment Development Department scandal has even come close to being understood by people. And I think little comments by his own administration members saying that without federal funds, the unemployment payments are unsustainable by our current budget. All of these things are going to get worse, not better. I mean, we're having epic wildfires, and you can't continue to say that that's climate change. It is forest management or lack thereof. The homeless issue is not getting better, it's getting worse. It will continue to get worse. So as people lose their jobs and continue to have issues, highest jobless rate in the country, highest homeless rate in the country, highest cost of living in the country, highest housing prices in the country. These are all things that are not going to go away overnight. You can't make it rain. And so I think he's not going to solve it. And it hasn't solved it yet, hasn't even started to, hasn't reversed the trend. In fact, he doesn't even acknowledge some of these problems. 2 weeks ago, he was running around saying that crime was on the decline, and it was clearly not. I mean, talk about a guy who brags about science. He's got his numbers all wrong, upside down.
All right, Ann Dunsmore.
Good luck with that.
With Rescue California, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's move now. Thank you, all three of you. Let's move now to Costa Mesa, the ballroom there at the hotel where the Elder campaign has gathered. Amma, this is the front runner in terms of the recall effort, the Republican who is garnering the most votes tonight. We've not yet heard from him. We heard from John Cox a few minutes ago. Wasn't exactly a concession speech, but it was pretty darn close because he is far, far down in the polling.
Right, and we will likely hear from Elder shortly. He had talked a lot about shenanigans and voter fraud, so I'm curious to see what he says. He had said he was not going to concede that, and we just heard from Rescue California, Republicans saying that this is not over by far. These are just the absentee ballots that were counted. So we'll be interesting to hear what he has to say when he comes out.
And again, ABC and other news outlets have called this election for the governor that he will retain his seat. And he will not be recalled. But again, numbers are still coming in, but those are the projections and calls by ABC and other networks. Now, Republican challenger in this recall election, Kevin Faulconer, spoke to supporters in San Diego just about 40 minutes ago. Here's what he had to say.
It's a very difficult time for our state's history, and that's why we need the leadership, again, somebody who understands that how do you win in California? You win by addition. You win by bringing Democrats, Republicans, and independents together for real change. When you do that, you can win. That's not only the best way to win, but that's the best way to effectively govern our state. I've always believed that. That's the type of leader I am. That's the type of leader I'm going to continue to be. And so I can tell you, as for what's next for myself, I'm going to take the time to talk not only to my family, but my supporters and figure out the best steps here in the coming weeks to continue to be a fighter, to continue to serve our great state. Because California is worth fighting for, don't you think, guys? So to all of you here tonight, thank you. My wife, Catherine, my entire family who is here, and everybody across this great state, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this campaign. Thank you for believing in California. I will leave you with this. Tonight was round one. There's more to come. Thank you, guys. Thank you all very much.
Kevin Faulconer, much as John Cox did, conceding essentially that this was not going to be his night.
Right. Let's get to our Liz Kreutz. She has been in Sacramento. She has been following this recall election, and Governor Newsom sounded very confident, his aides did in the last couple of days. Do we have Liz ready to go? Hi, Liz. So what's the vibe out there now?
Hey, Amma. Yeah. Hi, yes, we are here at the California Democratic Party headquarters, which is where you all just saw Governor Newsom come out and deliver those remarks, looking very confident that he has defeated this recall. This is not unexpected. His campaign was anticipating this would happen, as we've been saying. They said they didn't see a scenario where he would lose. He spoke here for about 4 or 5 minutes. He didn't take any questions. What struck me about his remarks, especially the beginning of his remarks, was just how optimistic the messaging was compared to what we've heard throughout this recall campaign. He came out and said Californians have resoundingly voted no on this recall, but they have voted yes on a number of issues. He specifically said they voted yes on all the things we hold dear in California: social justice, racial justice, environmental justice. So he's having a much more positive outlook now tonight after he has defeated this. And it's interesting that he's doing that because a lot of Democratic strategists have said as he now turns around and faces a re-election campaign in less than a year, he's going to have a much more positive message. What does Governor Newsom stand for? Not just what he is against. That will be what he needs to do moving forward. As we talk about his remarks, though, he did not miss a beat. He did go after former President Trump. He talked about the big lie and these allegations of election fraud, and he talked about how democracy is fragile. He said democracy is not a football. You don't throw it around. It's more like an antique vase. And he put this recall in the context of a larger issue he says is happening around the country. He repeated what he's been saying on the campaign trail, which is that Democrats have defeated Trump, but that the country has not defeated Trumpism. So that was the message here from Governor Newsom. He again left without taking any questions. There was no message to the millions of voters who did vote to recall him. It will be interesting to see what happens in the coming months as he does face this reelect. Strategists have said that in order for him to be confident and comfortable moving into next year, he should win this by double digits. It appears that's happening at the moment. That will definitely help prevent another Democrat from feeling like they should jump in and try to challenge him next year in the reelect. Alma and Dan, Kristen.
Yeah, Liz, let's look forward now. I mean, our guest a few minutes ago from an organization called Rescue California, Ann Dunsmore, insisted it's not over yet, and of course there are still numbers to count, but obviously Kevin Faulconer and John Cox disagree, and certainly the governor did with his remarks. Let's look forward. The governor certainly had some cold water splashed on him the last few months after winning in a landslide when he was first elected to suddenly being on very shaky ground. He did win this, it appears, handily, but this does not necessarily mean he's going to have an easy time of it going into the next election. What is he thinking tonight? What is his team thinking?
Absolutely. I think if he does win this handily, it definitely puts him in a better position as far as being able to ward off any other Democrat that jumps in. I did interview Orrin Heatley today, and Orrin is the founder of the Recall Gavin 2020 campaign. He's the person who originally went and started this petition of gathering signatures, and I asked him what is next, and he said, you know, for them, if this recall fails, which it appears it has, they are going to just continue their fight. They have organized across the state with Rescue California. They have millions of voters now on a voter file. They have volunteers across the state in every pocket that they can mobilize. So in that sense, Republicans have a better chance of mobilizing and continuing these efforts on a smaller scale. At the same time, though, Democrats have too. Governor Newsom's campaign has been touting that they have the largest ground game in the state of California, essentially on par with a presidential level ground game for a state. And so they've also put together these war rooms and these voter files, and they're also going to be able to mobilize those Democrats moving forward too. So Governor Newsom, in that sense, is in a good place since he's already set up a good ground game here because of this recall. Dan.
Okay, Liz, thank you very much.
All right, let's check in now with ABC7 News reporter J.R. Stone, who is live in Alameda County tonight. J.R.
I can tell you right now, somewhat of a lull in the action here in Alameda County, but these workers behind me, they have been busy at work all day long, so don't let that fool you. I do want to go to some of the video because this is what it's looked like in the past hour or two. We're talking about 100 different polling locations where people were able to drop off their ballots. So those ballots are now being taken to Oakland, and then they have to be counted. So it is going to be a busy night, and it has been a busy night here in Alameda County. And already they have counted more than 300,000 votes, with 84% in favor against this recall. But again, you have people on both sides. We've been talking with a lot of those people. This is what they had to say.
I am voting. I'm making sure that my voice and everybody else's voice hopefully is heard by all those people out there. They're trying to stir California in the wrong direction. We want to keep it going in the correct direction.
The front runner is Larry Elder. I've spoke with him several times on his radio show. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but at this point, that's who I voted for.
And back out here live tonight in Oakland, you see all of the workers here again. somewhat of a lull in the action, but it's on and off here. You'll have a number of cars come in and drop off those ballots from different locations across the county, so it will be a busy night. Interestingly enough, that woman you heard from there, Deborah, who was in favor of the recall, said there really wasn't one candidate that she was in favor of, any of those recall candidates, but she still felt like California needed a new direction. That being said, the turnout has been strong here in Alameda County. They expect 60 to 70%, so below the presidential election back in November, but still very strong here in Alameda County. Reporting live in Oakland, J.R. Stone, ABC7 News.
Okay, JR, thanks very much.
All right, we want to get now to California Assemblymember Mark Berman, who's here and maybe can talk some numbers for us. I'm interested in this $300 million worth of taxpayer money on a recall election that at this point it appears did not go through. We did not recall the governor. Talk about reforms and how this can change, if anything can be changed at this point.
I mean, first, thanks for having me on. I think you really struck upon one of the real problems with what we just went through is we wasted $300 million. And that's $300 million that could have been used to address homelessness or early childhood education or fighting forest fires. And instead, we clearly have a clear statement from California voters that they supported Gavin Newsom. They supported Governor Newsom overwhelmingly when he was elected in 2018. We'll see what the final numbers show here, but these numbers might end up being remarkably similar to what we had 3 years ago. And yet we wasted $300 million when we have an election next year to elect a governor in California. So I think there's a lot of interest in keeping the recall process, and I think that's important, but I think there's a lot of interest in reforming the recall process to make sure that we don't end up in this situation again where there's a clear waste of hundreds of millions of California taxpayer dollars that could have been used much better, in my opinion.
Yeah, Assemblyman Berman, this is Kristen Z, and we have seen polls in recent days, voters saying they appreciate there being a recall process. But let's talk about what there might be to reform in the California recall process. I think a lot of people don't realize, for example, the 12% signatures threshold for a recall to move forward is actually quite low, and there are no minimal requirements for geographic distribution of where those signatures come from. There's a whole host of things that make California a lower threshold to hit a recall than other states. If you can talk about some of the things you in the Assembly might be considering.
That's right. I think there's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of weeks about ways to improve the recall process. And let's just start with one of the fundamental truths of our current system, which is it's terribly undemocratic. When you have a system where somebody could become governor with 20% of the vote, with 20% of Californians voting in favor of them, and they could be governor, they could get a lot fewer votes than the existing governor gets, but maybe the existing governor doesn't meet the 50% threshold to stay in the job. That's an undemocratic process. And I think that's something that a lot of people can agree with. You brought up a great kind of part of the recall process, which is how many signatures that you have to get to actually put a recall on the ballot. California's 12% is the lowest in the country. 22 states have recall processes. I think a lot of people think that every state has one. That's not the case. It's only a minority of states that actually have a process to recall a governor. But out of those 22 states, California has the lowest vote threshold. So that is, I mean, I don't have an opinion on what I think is the right solution yet. I think that there should be a lot of conversations about the different ideas that have been thrown out there. One of the issues is raising that signature threshold so that it's a little bit harder, so that maybe we don't end up in the situation we are tonight, where it's a clear landslide and clearly the people that were trying to initiate a recall didn't have nearly a majority support of Californians. So an idea could be to increase that percentage, whether that's an increase, to 16% or 20%. I think that's a conversation that should be had. There are other ideas that have been thrown out about, well, should the governor be able to be on that second question, and be a candidate to be able to essentially keep his job, even if a majority of people vote yes on the recall. Maybe a plurality vote yes for the governor to actually as their preferred choice. There are ideas around maybe it should go to the lieutenant governor. Maybe if the governor gets recalled, we have a lieutenant governor, we have a second in command. Maybe that person should get promoted into the governor's mansion. These are all just ideas that are being discussed currently, and I'm sure we'll hear other ideas from folks in the coming days and weeks and months to find out how can we create a more democratic recall process in California and make sure that we don't waste hundreds of millions of dollars for what is clearly a very small minority of Californians who felt necessary to put the recall on the ballot.
Assemblyman Phil Matier, back to the hundreds of million dollars we wasted. Do you really think it cost that? Could we do a better job with less money? Do you
That's
really think
a conversation.
It cost $300 million? I mean, because the legislature basically opened up and said, and plus that doesn't take into account like the $16 million we did for television ads by the Secretary of State telling people to vote. I mean, is it $300 million what it should cost?
There might be a possibility. We can look deeper. This was the number that we were told by county elections officials across the state for how much it would cost for them to mail out ballots and then process ballots for California's 22 million voters. And I think especially in a recall election, I think voter outreach and making sure that voters understand that a recall is happening is even more important because we know Californians are spending so much time right now just trying to work and pay the bills and keep a roof over their head. A lot of them had no idea that a recall was happening. And I think it would be terrible if we had a recall where only, where a lot of people weren't aware and didn't participate in their democratic process out of lack of awareness. So, maybe we could save a couple million here, a couple million there, but I think it would be an expensive process.
Let's talk a little bit more quickly of something about that process, because what I've heard from a number of people, even some people who were for the recall in some respect, have wondered about what the criteria is or should be for a recall, not just a question of signatures, but should there be some threshold, i.e. criminal activity, some sort of wrongdoing, some sort of impropriety, not just, I did an okay job or a mediocre job. Should there be some other more stringent set of criteria in the law to trigger the potential for a recall?
I definitely think that's something we should discuss. I was talking with a friend earlier today, and he brought up what's in the U.S. Constitution, which we should not follow, which is high crimes and misdemeanors. But it doesn't say anything more than that. It leaves it remarkably vague and kind of up to the interpretation of whatever Congress of the day. But I do think that's something to be said, that there should be a higher threshold than, I don't like a bill that the governor signed, or I don't like an executive order that the governor passed. I don't think that should be reason for a recall.
All right. Quick question in terms of reform. Under the current law, Governor Newsom's supporters, there were no limits on the donations that they could receive. Now, we usually like to say, money and big money is not good for politics, but we're talking about an incumbent governor and basically raising $80 million, checks of $1.5 to $3 million, coming in from different groups. And let's be honest, they're special interest groups, whether they be unions or builders or prison guards or tech people. Is it fair that they should have be able to just unlimited write checks on something like this?
I think it's a good question and something that we should look at. I think, I didn't realize I was working in other states when the Davis recall happened in 2003. And I didn't realize until recently, when the governor was able to raise contributions by $1 million at a time, that was the case. And I guess it's because it's considered more of a ballot initiative and not necessarily a candidate election. But I think that is something that, is probably worth discussing to see whether or not we should tighten the regulations around the amount of money that governors who are under recall threat can raise. I'd be curious to know also what other states do in these situations and, what kind of regulations they have around these types of issues.
Assemblyman Berman, amongst Democratic circles, I wonder if there's a sense of urgency with regard to this type of reform over the recall, because is there the sense that a recall could become a regular thing in the state as California has become more blue, as Democrats now outnumber registered Republicans 2-1, which was not the case in 2003 when Governor Gray Davis was recalled, that this quote unquote, I don't want to say loophole, but this way that allows someone who gets minority number of votes to get in could become something that is attempted all the time. Do you see that?
I do, unfortunately. I think the partisanship of our state and our country, and the low threshold that you mentioned earlier to initiate a recall and get it on the ballot does just leave it ripe for abuse and ripe for people to use it constantly as a distraction. And as a way to possibly win a really important statewide elected office with a small minority of the vote. So I think it's important that it's something that we, have conversations about and identify possible reforms for. And then these reforms will have to go to the ballot. Most of pretty much any substantive reform to our recall process would be an amendment to the state's constitution. So that would require a 2/3 vote of the California legislature to put it on the ballot, and then a simple majority vote of California voters to approve it. So this is the beginning of a long conversation that I think you're going to see happening amongst elected officials and also amongst experts and amongst the public as to how can we improve this process and have it be more representative of the democracy that we hold dear.
All right, Assemblymember Mark Berman, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming on very much. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about voter turnout. Our Kate Larson has been in San Francisco this evening, and Kate, what can you tell us?
Well, Alma, we just heard from John Arntz, who is the director of elections here in San Francisco. He's been here for more than 2 decades, and he is very impressed with voter turnout in San Francisco so far. And remember, they've just counted the vote by mail ballots that were received at the office by yesterday, so about 246,000. And that's 53% voter turnout. You compare that to the November election, the presidential election, which was at 60% at this same point. So just 7 percentage points shy. And what is so impressive to John Arntz about those results is that November election was historic in terms of the turnout for San Francisco. Ultimately, there was 86% voter turnout. Now, John Arntz doesn't think that many people more, 26 percentage points more, will turn out for this recall election, but he does think those numbers will tick up as they start to count more ballots throughout the week. He's also impressed that so many people turned out because it's a bit of a confusing election. It was a September election. We're used to November elections, so that throws people off. And of course, it's a recall, which we haven't had since 2003. So it's not a ballot card that a lot of people are familiar with. So he's very pleased with voter turnout tonight. It does seem that everything ran smoothly here at City Hall. There were never lines of people because only about 1,000 showed up to City Hall, since really the majority were vote by mail voters who turned them in long before Election Day. So, it also begs the question of, is vote by mail sort of the way to go? Obviously, the pandemic changed some of this for our elections, and it seems to be working for turnout, seeing that it's going so well, at least here in San Francisco so far. And we are expecting another update from the elections department here in San Francisco at about 9:45 tonight. Just reading some of the results, San Francisco, 63% of registered voters are Democrats, and so far the no votes for the recall are 88%. So very much against the recall here in San Francisco so far. Live at City Hall, I'm Kate Larson, ABC7 News.
Yeah, all right, Kate, thank you. And that was clear to see, Dan, when Kristen was pulling up the San Francisco results on the map. It was just very stark.
No,
yeah,
very
thank
clear.
you, Kate.
All right, let's turn now to Stephen Maviglio, a Democratic strategist in California, who was also Governor Gray Davis's spokesperson during the 2003 recall. Stephen, if only you had those results 18 years ago, that's what you were hoping for during that recall. What do you make of what's happened tonight?
I hear the word recall. Yeah, I mean, this is a totally different scenario than 2003. You have to remember back then, Democrats and Republicans were almost at parity in the state. Now there's twice as many Democrats there are Republicans. Republicans actually trail independents. Huge numbers difference from the get-go. You also remember the climate in the state was a lot different. budget-wise. Gray Davis was facing billions of dollars in a budget deficit. He was forced to cut programs that were very near and dear to the hearts of a lot of Democrats, and there was a good number of Democrats who didn't actually put him at the top of their Christmas card list, and that's why his lieutenant governor appeared on the other side of the ballot. So that was a major difference in this race. The Newsom campaign did an amazing job of fencing out any other possible Democratic challenger and keeping the focus all on the Republicans and framing it as a Republican recall, and that math worked for them.
Yeah, it certainly seemed to. Let's talk a little bit about what's next. What does Newsom need to do now? Keep the momentum. Because, you know, we spoke to Christian Arana from the Latino Community Foundation talking about how, yes, he made the connection with the Latino community, but he needs to do more and continue to engage starting tomorrow, starting now, immediately. So what is it that he needs to do next?
Well, I think, you know, she and a lot of other groups are going to say, listen, we have an IOU that we like to collect on now. But I think Gavin Newsom in his remarks today played to what made him strong, and that was keeping up his progressive legislative agenda and policy agenda, playing to the Democrats who want the state to move forward, being an anecdote to what's happening with the Republicans on a national scale, rejecting Trumpism and continuing to talk about that. And I think you will see a lot of the experts nationwide looking at what happened here as we go into the 2020 midterms and see what they can mine from his success here. Mostly, from I'm looking at the polling and the exit polling tonight, the people who voted strongest for Newsom were the people who favored his strong stance on COVID restrictions and vaccinations. That is a potent issue nationally. These elections nationally and midterms are usually won in the suburbs, with women playing a deciding factor, and they broke strongly for Gavin Newsom. And I think the National Democrats are going to be crunching these numbers and seeing the lessons learned from here to take those nationwide. And I think Gavin Newsom will continue doing what he's doing and be probably even more progressive, given the resounding 90% plus of support he's gotten from Democrats tonight.
Steve, Phil Matier here. It's interesting. We both were involved I was covering it. You were involved in the Gray Davis recall. And you made a good point. You said that Gray Davis was not on the top of a lot of Democrats' Christmas list at the time. Let's be honest. I mean, there were key players in the Democratic Party, very powerful people in the state legislature and in the unions who were either trying to shake him down or put a knife in his back when that election was going on. Gavin Newsom's Democratic Party is decidedly different. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the changes within the power structure of the Democrats that put Gavin Newsom more as we've got to save him as opposed to Gray Davis as we can make book with Arnold.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, again, those numbers have changed so much. Democrats in the legislature enjoyed a majority, but nothing like we see today in Sacramento, where we have a 2/3 supermajority and then some. You know, no secret, John Burton, the state senator and Senate president from San Francisco at the time, and Gray Davis did not see eye to eye on much. And especially, it was very difficult for Gray Davis having to cut so many programs near and dear to the heart of Democrats like John Burton that resulted in a lot of, let's just say, not a lot of love. So that's the big difference here. And I give a lot of credit to Gavin Newsom for just boxing out any attempt by Democrats to get on the other side of the ballot. And he has now built this massive campaign machine heading into next year. And I don't think any Democrat would have any thoughts of running against him now, whereas if he'd only won this by a few percentage points, there would have been some blood in the water, and I think we would have seen a Democrat try to take him on in the June primary. But I think that threat has vanished tonight.
What does he have to do? Do you think he can sustain this Trump at the door, and Democrats continue to sustain this Trump at the door imaging, which we heard from President Joe Biden on down even tonight, with Gavin Newsom saying basically, I am for diversity, they're against it. I'm for a woman's right to choose, they're against it. That may or may not be the case, but is that going to hold, do you think, for him? Or does he, I mean, because we still have homelessness, we still have crime, like it or not, we still have the fires, we still have all these other things too.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing. I was like, well, that election was over. People want to move on and talk about the issues facing them every day. But look, it worked. You know, Donald Trump / Larry Elder was his chief foil here. Even tonight, he talked about what was rejected as opposed to what we're for. And I think Democrats are going to use that. As long as Donald Trump is toying with the idea of running again, as long as the House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is tied to him with shackles and backs everything he says, and so does the House, and so does Mitch McConnell, I think it's a winning issue nationally. And the Trumpism was rejected decidedly here, but it also gets rejected in the suburbs that Republicans need to win. And it looks like it's a winning formula.
Steve, let's talk about, this is Kristen Z. Let's talk about the importance of independents, because even though Democrats have a clear majority and outnumber Republicans, really Republicans are the third party in this state. Independents is really second in terms of numbers. And in 2003, a lot of them did vote for Schwarzenegger. But in this case, do you think that the independents have gotten even more progressive, more to the left, and to bringing in Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to campaign on behalf of the governor, and then later bringing on President Biden? Talk about that combination and how that's important, especially the independent and progressives.
Yeah, I think, you know, the reason Bernie Sanders and AOC were brought into campaign was to help with the youth vote. The youth vote lagged tonight. And I think that is one of the few soft spots for Democrats and Gavin Newsom. They didn't show up in the numbers we had liked them to. The Latino vote also underperformed a little bit, but not as much as some people were predicting. But, you know, independent voters are still largely swing voters. And most of the time they tend to vote Republican or Democrat, depending on what the issue and the candidate is. You know, Schwarzenegger was an anomaly because he was not, you know, he didn't talk about issues. He talked about themes and he talked about being Arnold. That was a little different kind of candidacy. But, you know, they're very important. I think, you know, Jerry Brown was very successful in winning over the independents because he was more moderate. He did play to them, being a little more pro-business and anti-tax. Still, the Democrats in Sacramento are still a little nervous about raising taxes. They haven't raised taxes in any significant way, despite these overwhelming majorities. So they always keep an eye open in these swing districts, because independents are very important in a lot of places in California. And as you look, as we go into 2022, there are 6 or 7 or 8 congressional seats that are still going to be up for grabs. And if Larry Elder is at the top of this ticket talking about all these crazy Trump things, that's going to really hurt those candidates.
Stephen, if Larry Elder is the front-running candidate in November and Gavin Newsom's campaign is able to continue to tie him to Donald Trump, is that the best thing that could happen for the Newsom campaign?
Hey, I said it tonight in the tweets. You know, Larry Elder is a gift that keeps on giving. If he feels like he's been empowered by whatever small slice of the electorate he got on the other side, and he said today he wants to remain a force in the Republican Party and possibly he's going to run again, you know, sign me up to help him, because I think that's the best news that Gavin Newsom could hear tonight, that he's going to be facing him again.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, Stephen Maviglio. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, let's turn now to Kristen. She has some more numbers for us coming in.
Yeah, I mean, we have most of the numbers in, but what's interesting, I think, is if you want to look at how Governor Newsom did this year in terms of beating the recall, right? It's pretty much 67 to 33, like 2/3 saying no. Let's compare that to 2018. Just look at the numbers. Actually, don't even look at the numbers. Just look at the colors, okay? Look at the yellow and the green. And now we're going to pull up the 2018 election, the blue and the red. You can see pretty much it's unchanged. Not a lot of movement in the counties. See that? The yellow voting no on the recall were pretty much the blue that voted, you know, for Governor Newsom in the election in 2018. See that? Really not much of a difference. You have still the coastal areas, right? Very much for Governor Newsom. He's really making a lot of inroads here, too. It's really the Central Valley area where you're still seeing the green against him, and also the Redding and above. We're talking Modoc, Lassen. Again, not too much change since 2018. I'm just going to pull up this heat map because that's another interesting way of kind of just looking at how intensely interested that county is in that particular party or candidate. You can see the deeper the shade of red or blue, the greater the support, right? So you can see, again, the Bay Area, not a surprise, very much dark blue hue, meaning strong support for Governor Newsom. And right now it's very dark yellow, which means very much saying no to the recall. And that's just kind of an interesting look at comparing really how things haven't changed all that much since 2018. And of course, that worked to the detriment of the recall supporters who thought that perhaps this is a different time with different concerns and that Governor Newsom was not going to run nearly as strong this time. That didn't turn out to be, at least so far.
That heat map is actually fascinating, Kristen. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Phil, let me ask you, given what she's talking about, and we've been talking about how, given the 2003 recall election, the makeup in terms of Democrat and Republican in California was vastly different than it is now. This has become a much more blue state, almost 2-to-1.
Yeah.
What does the Republican Party do in that configuration in the next election and going forward? They are almost, at least at the state level, in a no-win situation in terms of the numbers now.
You know, that's a really good question, but it's a better observation. I mean, let me ask you, is your question, what could they do, or
I think
what
so.
will they likely do?
Well, I think I would say both. What could they do, but what do you expect them to try to do? Because, what's the definition of crazy? Doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different outcome? Clearly, they have a numbers disadvantage, Phil.
They have a numbers disadvantage, they have an image disadvantage, and they have an ideological disadvantage. What happened with Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, was that he would never have been in a primary up against, he would never have survived a Republican primary. That's just it. He would have been too moderate, too liberal for California's Republican, which has become more and more conservative, okay? So the thing is, they keep repeating it. They keep coming at it and getting these same results. And what they need is to have somebody that's more moderate, that is, and doesn't get tied to the national issues of choice, of diversity, of gay rights, all of those things, and is going to basically say, look, I'm going to try to do a better job, but without completely changing the direction of the state.
And being a movie star or superstar would help, probably.
Well, because, there's a familiarity. One of the reasons people voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronald Reagan, for the matter, because they felt they knew them. We have a familiarity. We think we have a familiarity with celebrities.
They were popular.
And and people felt that they knew them. And, so what the Republicans need to do is sort of get back to that. They also, Larry Elder's a person of color. He's doing pretty good in a Republican primary for that. But it's also interesting to note that in this recall, and a lot of people were just against the idea of a recall, saying it's a waste of time. I don't know if I like it. I might not like Gavin Newsom, but I don't like it being done this way. We heard that. It didn't change much from the last election. So both sides are pretty much where they were before. It's not like Gavin Newsom did better. Or that the Republicans did better. They're both at this sort of 60-40 split. And so I don't know how the Republicans get out of that without getting out of their own way. That's just it. And as long as Trump is, as Stephen Maviglio said, as long as Trump is anywhere in there, and we are going to continue to try, and the Democrats are going to keep trying to bring him in as much as possible, and everybody is, because he gets attention. And as long as he's there, that's what they're going to play. They're going to make this about national stuff rather than about everything from the scandals at the unemployment to the question of fire management to everything like that.
It's fascinating,
isn't it?
It is fascinating to think what the Republican Party has to contend with, and in the next cycle and the years ahead, because they do have that numbers disadvantage, and the Democrats.
They don't have the money either, Dan. I mean, they don't have the money. They don't have the organization. The Democratic Party in the state of California is a 24/7, 365 operation between the.
And that's not the case with the Republicans.
No, it's not. They pick up when there's an election, and then they pretty much stop after when there isn't. The other is an ongoing thing, and that's you're up. You come up against that, and the money they can raise. It's a pretty solid thing.
And we're waiting to hear from the Elder campaign. The Costa Mesa Ballroom is what you're seeing here on the left side of your screen. Phil, what do you expect to hear from Elder tonight, considering what he has said over the past few days about accusing that there is voter fraud? What do you think he's going to say?
It's tough enough sometimes to think about what a politician's going to say, but they've usually got 3 or 4 scripts. Tomorrow's another day. We'll wait till all the votes are in. We're not saying no yet. This is a talk show host, okay? This is a guy who who makes his living by saying things that are totally unpredictable and being unpredictable. So I am sitting here waiting for Larry Elder as much as anybody else, going, what is he going to say?
It's live TV.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
What will be particularly interesting is the last few days he's been asked pointedly many times, will he accept the results of this election? And he hasn't really answered that directly, and he has implied the last couple of weeks that there may be some voter irregularities or voter fraud to be looked into. Again, we all remember what happened at the last presidential election, where President Trump at that time completely falsely claimed that there was widespread election fraud. That just wasn't the case. It will be interesting to see if Larry Elder tries that approach tonight, even though we have heard of no evidence of any significant voter irregularities in California.
And with results like this, even if you had questionables or some, problems, it's not going to necessarily change it.
Same was true in the presidential election.
But also remember, when these people come out and make whatever speeches they're going to make, they're also talking to the people that voted for them, and some of their supporters don't want to give up. Right. They don't want to give up. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear you throwing in the towel. No, they're saying we're taking to the hills. The fight's not over.
Ballots aren't all counted.
And if you say that it's over,
they are preaching to the choir. Both parties are.
Or the mob that's not ready to give up. And then if you give up, they're not happy with you. Then
that's true. And to finish your point, look at what Gavin Newsom said earlier tonight, talking about what people voted for, et cetera,
right.
not just what they voted against. But what he didn't do is speak to Republicans and those who wanted to recall him. That wasn't. He didn't try to do any sort of conciliation in that respect. Kristen, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Larry Elder, what he might say tonight, he has hinted that at 2022, next year, right? And he has said, I am now a political force to be reckoned with. I now have a following, so we definitely don't expect him to go quietly into the night. But hey, at this point in the night, I thought you guys might just like a little break, and how about do a little quiz show or a game show?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you three ready? You're the contestants, okay? I get to play host for a moment here.
Do we know what we win first?
Do we get parting gifts?
We want to know what the stakes are.
Free pizza for all. Free pizza.
We already had that.
That's newsroom.
Yeah, but this is the older pizza.
We had that earlier.
Okay. I have full confidence that you guys know the answers. We're going to start easy. Basically, which county in the 58 counties that make up California, which county voted most overwhelmingly no on the recall? Who wants to offer up the first guess?
Entire state. I'm going to guess somewhere in the Bay Area, but
yeah, I don't know.
Okay, take a county.
Marin.
Take a county. Okay, Phil says Marin. Dan?
I'll say Napa.
Marin was my first guess, then I said San Mateo. So.
Okay, so let's see if you're right. Phil, you said Marin. Boom.
Wow.
85% no. All right, Alma, you said San Mateo. 80%.
Oh, that was close.
Not a bad guess. Dan, you said Napa, right? Sorry, that's Solano. There you go. Napa at 72%. Phil, you're the winner. You get the pizza. Pepperoni or cheese?
Oh, wait a minute. In all fairness, can you check and see what San Mateo's vote was?
Yeah, let's go back to San Mateo. San Mateo, 70% reporting, 80%
and
saying
San Francisco?
San Francisco. You know what? That would have been my guess. So let's see, where do I stand? Oh, I win.
Oh, it's rigged. It's rigged.
Yeah, but if you don't play.
88% no.
Wow.
Quelle surprise. I had no idea. I was not
Interesting how the woman who controls the board wins the contest.
All right, I get the pizza, you guys.
Oh, good times.
That is interesting. Any more questions? No, that's it. Okay,
sure.
we'll come back to the...
But do we get parting gifts?
Yes, Dan, how many counties are there in California? Alma, name the county seats.
Who's the mayor in XYZ? You know, one thing I think that is interesting, anybody comment on this, maybe start with you, Phil, and then Kristen and Alma as well, but interestingly, there were several counties in Southern California, typically conservative counties, that voted fairly strongly no on the recall effort.
Yeah, and you know, in some ways this recall effort, which I gauge by, like I said, people out with signs, you know, lawn signs. People are actually getting involved in it. As I traveled around the state, I found one of the biggest groups that were mad at the governor is in the ag area. It's over water. It's something that we don't necessarily think about except for to conserve it in a time of drought. But that's a vital sort of function for a lot of these areas is water and water policy, and they feel that they're getting the short shrift on water. That's not necessarily something like in a populated Orange County, which is changed its demographic. It is much more, a lot more immigrants. There are a lot more. There's a lot more diversity. There's more money. They're more urban. Okay, some issues like crime or something might be there, but if you look out at the rurals, they have one set of issues. The cities have different, and I think that the Orange County is undergoing a change, but I would not say that this election is necessarily reflective of how people are going to vote in a regular election. Because again, the first question was recall, yes or no. So you're not only being asked to assess someone, you're being asked to say whether I go along with the way we're doing this.
Right.
And I think that the Newsom camp made a very good case for saying no to the recall. It wasn't say yes to Gavin Newsom. That was not the campaign. The campaign was no to the recall.
Yeah, which he called a weaponized process.
Right. And so that's... So I would say that it's once again proof that the state has changed, but I think there's a lot more independence down there. That's mine.
You guys, I just pulled up Orange County for you on the big board. If we want to take that, we can certainly do that because, Dan, you mentioned some of the typically conservative counties in Southern California, Orange County being one of them, and look at the result there.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, 57% saying no to the recall, and I'm sure some of it is what, Phil was just talking about, no to the recall.
And I don't know these numbers, but I would imagine that was very different in 2003.
One number, I don't know if we have it. We have the number of returned votes, and we have the number of which way they're going, but do we have the number of what the turnout was?
In 2003?
No, tonight, what today? Do we have what the actual turnout was?
Not a hard number.
We know it's about 65% of the turnout in 2018. So that's what we have, comparison to 2018. And for a special election, that's pretty good if you're getting 2/3. And we're not done counting yet, right?
Okay.
And look what we heard from Alameda County, where J.R. Stone is, a big turnout there today and tonight.
I'm curious, Phil, do you think that the message to the governor is that the handling of, I guess when I just look at all the people who are running against him, it was very polarizing in terms of the COVID approach, the pandemic approach. I am going to lift the mask mandate. Parents are going to get to decide whether they send the kid to school with a mask. I mean, does this send the message that, yes, you're doing everything on point with COVID, but yet maybe we still have this homelessness problem, we still have these horrible fires where people don't even want to live here because it happens every year, that he needs to really make some ends on those fronts, but with COVID, he's just spot on?
Right, he is spot on with 60% about what the vote was. As Dan mentioned, he was talking about earlier polls. I think
3 out of 10 say it was too much. 7 out of 10 agreed with
7 out of 10 agreed with him. So he was his people saw that, and they saw what they said was that if you look at the number, one of the numbers that they were looking at was the vaccination rate. They were looking at how many people in the state eligible for vaccination, which would be 12 and older, were vaccinated. And it was, as that number grew, they said that is where we want the race to go. We don't want this to be about homelessness. We don't want this to be about fires. We don't want this to be about the cost of living. We're going to make it about what people agree with. And from the fact that they're putting the shots in their arm shows that they're pro-vaccine. So let's go for the vaccine and the mask mandates, and let's make that the issue.
Yeah, because Stephen Maviglio, he was saying it's the women, it's the suburbs, that's where this is won, and that's where the families are.
Yes, so they saw that. It was the first time I've ever seen medical records being used to plot the political thing, but as the vaccination rate went, and as the variant came in and we saw the resurge, they said if we've got 80% people vaccinated, they figured that 90% of the registered voters were vaccinated because, more people, if you're registered to vote, chances are, that's a smaller margin than everybody else. And they said that is where we should be going. That's the issue right there. And we saw that in the final weeks of the campaign.
Well, what will be interesting, too, is let's assume, by the next election cycle, with any luck, COVID will be somewhat of a faded memory. It will still be here with us in some respects, but it may not be the principal issue that the governor will be judged on. What will that issue become?
That issue is, well, I would just go that if we look at now and what is the issues down that people are looking at and the issues that his people are saying they're worried about, the number one is homelessness. They said the tents are getting worse all up and down the state, and that is a visual thing that is, if it's allowed to continue for 2 more years, people are going to have, the cost of living is getting bigger. You know, from everything from gas to utilities, that's big. And what they're really also afraid of, Dan and Alma, is inflation. Because that's what Gray Davis had to face. If the economy stops in the next 2 years, if there's a problem in the economy, all bets are off for everybody.
Yeah, but we're already starting to see that, Phil, and things are starting to get expensive.
And that's when you start seeing voter discontent. If your dollar doesn't go as far as it did, your issues get a lot more shrunk down, you know?
It's all pocketbook issues
exactly.
in some respects, and certainly the cost of living has really started to impact.
But the flip side is this, as you pointed out, if the Republicans continue to put up their type of candidates that they do, then you just shift it over and say, well, do you want to go that way?
Right.
So,
all right. Thanks, Phil.
So, in a way, Governor Newsom is looking at tonight's results and Larry Elder emerging as the leading Republican and saying that's a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one, it's not going to, it'll keep other Democrats out. And then 2, if it's a Elder type out there, then that'll be a gift.
All right.
That's going to be the conversation, not the homelessness, not the economy, but
Let's move on quickly now. We're waiting for Larry Elder. He's supposed to come out any minute, but let's go right now to ABC7 News reporter Amanda Del Castillo. She's live at the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters. Amanda.
Yeah, Dan, lots of activity just behind me. All these cars just pulling up now. We know volunteers and workers are bringing in ballots collected from the 100 official ballot drop box locations throughout Santa Clara County. A swift yet expensive process considering just how large Santa Clara County really is. The county's registrar's office anticipated they would have at the very least 60% of ballots returned during the recall election. That number surpassing only slightly. There are roughly 1 million registered voters in Santa Clara County. Each received a recall ballot in the mail. Officials say early on there were a few voters who had some confusion, surprised to see only 2 questions on the ballot. Throughout the afternoon, those we spoke with shared just the opposite, confident and certain about their votes. Many today admitting they're throwing their support behind the governor, adamant about him keeping his office.
I care, you know, I live in California, and I mean, I like what Gavin Newsom been doing as a governor.
I don't like Gavin Newsom, but I'm voting no because I'm tired of all these games.
At times, we counted a couple dozen people waiting to vote, even more voters in their cars dropping off their ballots. Everyone we spoke with pointing to the sheer importance of this recall election, wanting to make sure that they have a say. But back live, you can see the busy work from a lot of these workers and volunteers at the Santa Clara County Registrar's Office. Everyone still say that there is a busy night ahead, of course, as the ballots continue to get dropped off. Again, 100 ballot drop-off locations that they're coming in from. I'm reporting live in San Jose. Amanda Del Castillo, ABC7 News.
We're waiting for our microphone. Amanda, thanks very much.
And Kristen, you had a question for Amanda?
Republican Larry Elder had hinted at, implied that there were irregularities and shenanigans, that there were issues. Have you heard of anything at all where you're at tonight, anything out of the ordinary or any problems people might have encountered?
Not from the people that we spoke with today. I'm in connecting with a lot of people, the people who were in line beginning, we got here around 4 o'clock, from 4 until about 7 o'clock. Everyone very, as I said, confident just about who they were voting for. Nothing said about any shenanigans, nothing said about any voter fraud. But just before 8 o'clock, we did connect with a few people who were here to vote for Larry Elder. Still no mention of the fraud in those conversations. So as we've been here, just nothing about those shenanigans, Kristen.
Thanks. I mean, we should point out, we haven't, to Kristen's point, it's a great issue to raise. We really haven't heard of that anywhere in California in any significance so far. So that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, let's get to ABC7 News reporter Laura Anthony. She is with the Elder campaign in Orange County, and it is loud in there, Laura, I can tell.
It is, Kristen, and I have to tell you guys, as you know, I've been to many election night headquarters. Once a race is called, typically, and in many cases, everybody leaves. That's not what is happening here. Let's show you right now. This is the Hilton in Costa Mesa, Orange County. I don't think anyone's leaving because about 10 minutes ago they said fairly soon that Larry Elder would come out in 10 to 15 minutes. It's been at least that long, but you can see there's a lot of anticipation here. In fact, it seems like he may be coming out here. This crowd has been building throughout the night. Even when the race was called, nobody left. All they did was turn off the TV screens. And as you can probably hear, they're starting to chant, Larry, Larry. They very much want to hear from him. And there's been no indication here that, in anyone's view, at least in this room, that this race is lost. It will be quite interesting to see what Larry Elder himself has to say, because he went on the radio earlier today at a radio station down here in Los Angeles and talked about how he had no plans to concede, even though the polls were not in his favor, and that the person who should concede is Gavin Newsom. Of course, now we have election results and the race has been called, yet it'll be interesting to see what he has to say.
It certainly will. Laura Anthony reporting live for us tonight at Costa Mesa Ballroom, where we are expecting to hear from the Elder campaign, from Elder himself shortly. All right. And, you know, we did hear from Governor Newsom, who will keep his job. The ABC has projected that he is the winner of this recall election, so have the other networks. We did hear from Governor Newsom about an hour ago or close to it, and here is what he had to say in brief remarks in Sacramento to his supporters. Oh, no, actually, we're going to stop. I think Larry Elder may now be coming out. Let's go back now and listen to Larry Elder, who is now just appearing on the podium.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Knock it off. We're going to be here a while. You know how I can go. First of all, I really want to thank my brilliant campaign staff. My campaign manager, Jeff Corliss, my co-chair, Tony Strickland, my campaign chairman, Lionel Chetwin. Lionel, come up here, give me some love. Give me some love, Lionel. And his significant other, Super Glow Gloria. My goodness. Ying Ma, communications director, Jennifer Alazieri. Took me a while to learn how to pronounce that, but I finally developed it. I hope I don't leave anybody out, the rest of my campaign stand. Deanne Tate, where's Deanne? I never have quite understood what Deanne did. Every time I say so, she just does a little bit of everything. But I want to thank the volunteers who knocked on doors, who called people, who emailed people. Over 100,000 people who contributed to our campaign. Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. Agnes, how are you? I love you more. Don't tell my girlfriend. She's kind of territorial. Mark, how are you? Mark, you were there from day one. God bless you. Where's Betty Chu? Is Betty around? Betty's what is she? I hate, my mom used to tell me, never mention a woman's age. What are you, 82 years old, 84? First Asian American to pass the bar of California, become a lawyer. You know, our campaign was all Michael Horn, how are you? God bless you. I love you more. Yes. We all love you, Larry. Oh. Nasrin, how are you? Nasrin, how are you? This campaign, where's Gloria? Where's Gloria Romero? I don't see Gloria Romero anywhere. There she is, Gloria Romero. Gloria, let me say something about Gloria Romero. You know who Gloria Romero is. Gloria Romero is a Democrat. I'm hoping a recovering Democrat, but we'll see. She was the Senate Majority Leader She crossed party lines. She's still a Democrat. Like my mother was still a Democrat. My brother was still a Democrat. I couldn't get them to change their party, but I got them to vote a lot more sensibly. Gloria crossed state party lines and supported my candidacy because of the issue of school choice. Because of the issue of school choice. As you know, my opponent, Governor Gavin Newsom, come on, let's be gracious. Let's be gracious in defeat. And by the way, we may have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war. Gloria crossed party lines because of the issue of school choice. We're spending $15,000 every year for students in our government schools in California. Notice I don't call them public schools, I call them government schools. $15,000 a year, some of the worst reading scores, some of the worst math scores. Only about 15 or 16 states spend more. And the students that are getting the raw end of the deal are the black and brown students who comprise 80% of the government students in our government schools. They're getting the worst teachers, the worst principals, the worst administrators, the worst outcomes. What is the route from poverty to middle class? At least finish high school. One, presumably where you can read, write, and compute at grade level, and that is not happening. I read a study that said roughly 5% of government teachers across the nation are incompetent. Roughly 5%. I have no idea whether that's true of California, but let's assume for a moment that it is. There are 300,000 public school teachers in California. Any given year, 2.2 are fired. If it is true that 5% are incompetent, that means 15,000 are incompetent. 2.2 every year are fired. Again, I'm not saying that applies to California, but assuming it does, imagine if that applied to cops in LA. I'm in LA. 10,000 force, assuming 15% were incompetent. We're talking about 500. 500. Doing what? Planning evidence? Engaging in racial profiling? Using excessive force? We wouldn't put up with it. We'll put up with 15,000 incompetent public school teachers. That is why Gloria and I support school choice. So the money goes into an account, education savings account, that the parent can control, put the kid in a charter school, a private school, a religious school, or God forbid, homeschooling. The reason we started this campaign is because this man, Governor Gavin Newsom, was sitting up there at the French Laundry restaurant with lobbyists who contributed to his campaign, with the people who drafted the mandates that they were violating by not wearing masks, by not engaging in social distancing, while telling you to do it. Meanwhile, his own kids were enjoying in-person private education. Now, he incurred a $12,000 wine tab. No, I don't know what they ordered, but I bet you it wasn't Mad Dog 2020. Crime up. Crime up. 41% in LA, and I'm talking about shootings, homicides. Under this governor, 20,000 convicted felons were released early. What could possibly go wrong? The other day, former Senator Barbara Boxer was mugged in Oakland. You're not cheering for Barbara Boxer being mugged, are you? This is a rough crowd. It's a rough crowd. Also, I wanted to give some love to Arnie Steinberg. Arnie Steinberg, my strategist. Arnie, you were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Also, Jenny Sand is here. Jenny, without you, I probably wouldn't have run. Jenny Sand, Pastor Jack Hibbs. Dennis Prager. And again, my chairman, Lionel Chatwin, all of whom advised me to run. But ultimately, I decided to run because I felt that I could do something about the crime. I could do something about the homelessness. I could do something about the fact that California has now hit $800,000 average price of a home. That's 150% above the national average. Outrageous because of the stranglehold the environmental extremists have had over Gavin Newsom and have had over Sacramento. Love you more. We have 5 seasons in California now. The 5th one is fire because of the poor forest management. Outgoing Governor Jerry Brown had a plan to clear 500,000 acres of fallen trees, dead trees, and dry vegetation. And our governor claimed that he cleared 90,000 acres, which would have been a drop in the bucket if it were true, but it wasn't. According to the LA Times, he only cleared 13% of what he said he would, which meant he exaggerated by a factor of 7. You know, before the pandemic, half of all 3rd graders in our government schools could not read at state levels of proficiency. Half. And those levels are low. Math scores even worse. 75% of black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency. Math scores are even worse. Because I care about this, I've been called the black face of white supremacy.
You're watching Larry Elder from the Costa Mesa Ballroom speaking live on a night where the recall effort against Governor Newsom failed, although he emerged as the leading candidate. And if we can take anything from his speech to his supporters tonight, it's a campaign speech for the next election next year, where he will likely challenge Governor Newsom in the general election. Here's a look at the numbers, Amma.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see yes for the recall was only 34%, 66% voting no. At this point, 61% of the estimated total vote is in. So that is it. But Elder thanking the volunteers, but saying it's going to be a long night.
Yeah.
But it doesn't appear so for him.
No, but it's going to be, we will hear much more from him in all likelihood. Let's give Phil and Kristen a chance to button things up for us before we say goodnight for this moment. Kristen, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Governor Newsom has got to feel good about not just the fact that he survived, but really it was a resounding no on the recall. I mean, 66%, that beat the 62% that he got to get elected for the governor's position back in 2018. And his ability to energize the Democratic voters and perhaps a lot of the independents who came out and voted against the recall, that did surprise a lot of people because the worry was always low turnout, right? That the Republicans who wanted to recall him would be energized. They will be the one to mail in their ballots or show up at the polling places. It appears actually that he and the party have done a good job of that, a better job of that tonight.
Phil, last words?
Well, first of all, Larry Elder, what did he say? We may have lost the battle, but we haven't lost the war. So he's pretty much conceded, although he's going on in what appears to be a stump speech. As far as the recall itself, Gavin Newsom is reaffirmed. We reaffirmed his election results from a couple of years back. I would say that it's all within this sort of margin. It's not, didn't gain anything, hasn't lost anything, reaffirmed it, and it still shows a California state that is pretty still divided, 60-40.
All right, thank you both. Interesting night tonight, Amma.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will, of course, continue to cover this. This is going to be it for our digital streaming show, though, about the California recall. But do stay tuned for more ABC7 News at 11. We will have a complete wrap-up of the evening tonight.
Yeah, we'll be back on the ABC7 News with that coming up at 11 o'clock. But for Kristen Z, Phil Matera, Amma Dates, I'm Dan Ashley. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you again in 45 minutes over on Channel 7.